How do we take care of our wetsuit? That's probably the second important question that we want to kind of know about. So obviously, again, many of us have figured this out in the past, but for those who maybe haven't, when we are done using our wetsuit, we should not just leave it rolled up in our bag, soaking wet, and pull it out and put it on the next day. Because, well, one, that just kind of feels gross to put something on that's soaking wet and kind of cold at that point. So we want to be able to dry it out. If it's kind of smelly, we can wash it a bit with some mild detergent or shampoo. You don't want to just squirt the shampoo on the wetsuit though, because it can, depending on what you're using, it can kind of degrade the fabric and kind of take away the waterproofness of it over time. So if your wetsuit needs a bath, you can literally give it a bath. Fill up your bathtub and put some shampoo or some laundry detergent in the water, but not a ton. We're not going for like suds all over the tub, just kind of enough that it's there, and then you can kind of clean it out a bit. Definitely don't be putting it in your washing machine or the dryer, because that's also going to damage the cloth, make it break down faster. So we can wash it out when we need to. Even if it's not dirty per se, you still want to try to wash all that salt water out of it if you can. So just a quick rinse in the shower is good for that. Just rinse it with fresh water. It's already wet, right? So putting it in water is not really wasting any time. But we do want to try to get that salt water out of it. So rinsing, just a little quick freshwater rinse. Another thing, if you're trying to get rid of some smell, I find this to be especially helpful if you've got the boots or maybe some gloves that just really has a bit of a smell going on. You can put some vinegar in, soak them in not straight vinegar, but vinegar and water. Soak them in that for a little bit, and that will usually help cut the stinky foot kind of smell. So yeah, main point there is we're not looking to put it in the washing machine, but we do have options if we need to get it cleaned. And then obviously we want it to dry out, so hang it up somewhere that's got some decent ventilation. So make sure there's some air circulation so it does have a chance to dry out. But once we've done that rinse, we don't want to just kind of ball it up back in the sailing bag, because that's how you get things to smell. So it's kind of the care of the wetsuit. The other thing the other option for the cold weather gear is the dry suit, obviously, and that is sort of the step up as we've seen. It does have the ability to keep you warmer. It keeps you dry if it's working correctly. But that's going to be made mostly your dry suits are going to be made of nylon. So like we talked about with making spinnakers, what was it, last week when we talked about how sails are made? That's the material we make spinnakers out of, because it can be very light but still very strong. And so that's obviously two things we would like to have for our dry suit. So we're able to make it a waterproof, and the seals at your neck and at your wrists and at your ankles, or a lot of them actually just have the kind of the feet. So there is no even ankle seal. You just have like a little thin boot. It might be that nylon, or you might have a rubber latex boot. But yeah, typically there won't even be the ankle seals that you have to worry about, because your foot's inside the dry suit as well, which is nice. But on those seals, obviously they're typically either neoprene or latex rubber stuff. So probably the latex is the more common. I think my dry suit actually has neoprene wrist seals and latex neck seal, which I feel like the neoprene lets water soak in a little bit. It's a tighter fit than a wetsuit wrist seal. But I feel like it does let water leak in eventually if you stay down for a long time. But the latex seals usually pretty good. So some dry suit care tips. How do we There's obviously more parts and different materials. How do we take care of all that? So the same sort of, washing and drying stuff applies. We definitely don't want to be throwing that dry suit into a washing machine or a dryer, because there's just a lot of things that could go wrong there. If you put it in a dryer, I would honestly start worrying about, kind of messing up that latex, those seals. You might even kind of melt them, stick them to each other. Not melt in the sense that, it's liquid, but in the sense that it's kind of tacky and it can almost stick to itself. So we definitely don't want that to happen. So we can still, if we need to, they usually don't have the same kind of smell problem as the wetsuit because of the different material it's made of and the fact that we're not, soaking in it for a long period of time. So usually you're not trying to get rid of smells, but if you do happen to get dirty in any sense there, we can still, wash it with a real diluted mild detergent or shampoo or something. It's not the sort of thing we're looking to do, every day or every week. So there's that. And then when we're trying to dry our dry suit, most of the time you do have those feet, right? So water that's running down the inside of your dry suit is going to puddle in your feet. So what I would do is I hang it up somewhere that there is some good air circulation, maybe in the bathroom with the fan running or something like that. But I'll let the outside dry, and then I'll flip it inside out and hang it back up and make sure the inside's been able to dry out too, just to make sure that there's no moisture sitting around anywhere. When you're going to store it for a long period of time, maybe over the winter or something like that, or over the summer when we're obviously not needing as much of the cold gear, we do want to kind of protect those latex seals, right? So we can put some talc powder on them, that like white powdery stuff, and it just makes sure that rubber, that latex stuff is not going to kind of get tacky and stick to itself over time. Apparently we don't want to use baby powder. I found that out, not personally, but reading things. Baby powder apparently has petroleum in it, which is it is a chemical that can break down those latex seals. So if we're looking for that, we're looking for talc powder. That's TALC, I guess, not baby powder. That'll keep those latex, those rubber seals on your wrists and on your neck from getting like sticky and getting stuck to itself. And then the zipper. So I think most zippers we see now are the plastic kind, but I think there is still a good number of the metal zippers. I don't know what type of metal, but you either have a big plastic zipper or a big metal zipper on your dry suit. So whichever one it is, we want to avoid, bending that. Especially the metal ones, I think they'll be hurt more by that. But whether we're rolling or loosely folding or however we're storing that suit, if you can, you probably want to hang it up. But if we're looking to roll it up or put it in our sailing bag, we want to make sure that we're not folding that zipper in half, because that's when you might bend or break some zipper teeth, and then you're going to have troubles when you try to zip or unzip it over that portion of the zipper. If you do have a metal zipper, even if you have a plastic zipper, but especially the metal ones, you want to keep them working well. So we can put for storing it, like we're talking about how to keep the seals good. If we're storing it for a while, we can put either like some beeswax, or they make like special lubricant stuff you can put on the zipper. Just make sure you don't, if it's the metal type, we don't want it to get any sort of corrosion on it or anything. And the plastic, we just don't want anything, hanging up in there, getting stuck. So they're saying don't use Don't use like oil-based lubricant, because that'll make things, you'll get dirt and dust kind of stick to it. But the beeswax and stuff, and the other kind of like special lubricants you can get for the zippers, they're more of like a dry lube, so they don't make stuff stick to it. Um, so that's kind of what you can do to, keep it in the best shape possible when you're storing it for a longer period of time. Also, when you're storing things, whether we're talking about dry suits or wetsuits or your boots or whatever it is, anything that's got a zipper, you don't want to store it with the zipper like all the way open or all the way closed typically, because that's sometimes where you'll notice it does get stuck and it's difficult, especially the boots. We see a lot of people have trouble with the boots, and I've definitely seen a couple people that have just given up and the zipper doesn't work and the boot's just always open, which, I mean, I guess that works, but like, why not keep your stuff working? So if you keep that zipper kind of halfway up, or at least not at the extreme end of either direction, that'll just make it a little easier to. It makes it less likely to get stuck in one position if it's kind of halfway open. So especially with the boots, I've found that to be very useful. So yeah, that's the wetsuit, the dry suit, kind of how to take care of them, what they're useful for. So that's your the big articles. Then we also sometimes, depending on what we're using, we might have to wear stuff underneath or over top of them. So obviously the wetsuit is built in, insulation. It's kind of how it's designed. It provides you with warmth. The dry suit is, like we said, it's just that kind of thin nylon waterproof shell. It's almost like if you had a raincoat that completely covered you. So you're staying dry, but not necessarily warm with the dry suit. So you're usually going to need to wear some stuff underneath it. I think it does get a little more versatile than the wetsuit in that respect, because you can change the amount of insulation you have underneath. Whether if it's really cold, you can layer up. We get those sweatpants and all sorts of stuff underneath. And then as the weather gets a little warmer, but we still need the dry suit because the water's cold, we can you can hop into your dry suit in shorts and a t-shirt, and it'll keep you dry when you fall in the water, but not as hot when you're out of the water. So definitely plenty of options underneath. The big thing you want to make sure is that you're not hopping in with like jeans that have like those little rivets on them and stuff. Nothing that's any hard objects on your clothing underneath it, because we don't want to make a puncture in the suit. So if you're sitting there with those jeans with the rivets on and you're sitting right on the side of the boat, that's crushing the dry suit fabric between that rivet and the side of the boat, which is it's like hammer and anvil. We're going to poke a hole through that suit. Or even if not a hole, then at least there's a little bit where we're kind of hurting the integrity of the fabric. We might start to get a little bit of a leak, even if we don't have a physical hole there. So make sure anything we're wearing underneath that suit is pretty soft. As far as things that might go over, especially the wetsuit, we might see people wearing some spray gear. So whether that's the kind of overall bibs with the shoulder straps, and then like the spray top, or some people just wear a raincoat or some rain pants. I know Hannah Davis has had some good success with that blue rain suit. How long have you had that, Hannah?
The blueberry suit, I got
Yeah.
it like, I don't even know. I feel like I've had it the whole time.
Okay. So yeah, it certainly lasted a while, and it probably did not cost anywhere close to the amount that some more specialized sailing gear would have. So certainly there are ways to go a little cheaper than going to APS and spending whatever it is. I think those like spray pant overall things are like $100, and you can probably get a rain suit for like 45, or I'm just making up numbers, but certainly much cheaper options. And it's going to be the same kind of stuff. It's going to be nylon fabric, so it's totally waterproof, except you obviously don't have the waterproof seals. You'll have, but when you're just in the boat and trying to keep the spray off you, trying to keep the spray from getting your wetsuit all wet and then feeling a little cold. Having that, either that rain suit or that spray top, the spray pants, can be really nice. So you really only are going to get wet if you do fall in the water. And especially as we get a little more skillful in our sailing, we can often avoid ever fully falling in the water. So that can be really helpful. So what was I saying? Yeah. So as far as the spray gear, it can be really versatile too. So you can have that to wear over top of the wetsuit. But then when the weather starts warming up and now we don't require the wetsuit anymore, but it's still kind of chilly if you get splashed by a wave, you want to stay dry if you can. So we can go out with just maybe the spray pants on. And so then you're really, especially if you do happen to have the overall type, so it's kind of coming halfway up your chest, your little splashes you get from doing your roll tack or whatever is really going to keep the water off you, even if you're just kind of sitting there in your swim trunks. So the spray pants can be pretty useful, or maybe it's kind of the opposite side of things when it's the fall and the water's still pretty warm from the summer, so we really don't care if we get a little wet on our legs. But now maybe the air is getting a little chillier, and so just having that spray top is nice, or your raincoat if that's the sort of thing you have. But just having the little shell to kind of cut the wind, that can be helpful just by itself. So if you end up with kind of the wetsuit and spray gear combo, then it's like a 3-piece suit. You can kind of pick and choose what you use when, just one of them or two or all three, depending on what sort of weather you got, whether it's cold water or cold air or cold water and cold air. You can kind of mix and match and figure out what works best for you. Then as far as the feet and hands, obviously we've got the boots we can get and the gloves. So the neoprene stuff, everybody gets the wetsuit boots, and then you'll often see people with the neoprene gloves, and that's good for the cold. Again, it works the same way as the body wetsuit does. It's gonna let a little bit of water in there and just keep a little warmer. So probably the gloves, because you're moving your hand around all the time, and they often aren't quite as a skin tight fit as the rest of the suit. You probably don't have water staying in there all the time, and so you probably notice that even if you wear those neoprene gloves, your hands still feel pretty cold. It's partly that, and partly just your fingers have a lot of surface area compared to how much inside of your finger there is compared to your body, which is obviously, it's got a lot more surface area than the fingers, but has even more volume. And so it's a lot harder for you to lose a lot of heat out of your torso, but your fingers will lose heat and get cold very quickly. So even wearing those neoprene gloves, it can still get a little uncomfortable. So it's just kind of something we have to realize that will happen. But so for the warmth, you go with the neoprene stuff if you can. But then when we're getting into summer and it's getting a lot warmer, obviously it becomes a little uncomfortable to be wearing that neoprene stuff all day. With the boots, it's perfectly fine to wear them year round. Typically the feet aren't something that you sit down and you're like, wow, my feet are really hot, this feels bad. I don't know, maybe you felt that before, but typically your feet don't feel that way the way you would if you tried to wear a full wetsuit, and your whole body would feel hot. But the problem with the neoprene in the summer is that your feet will get hot even if they're not sitting there telling you that, and you just get that stinky foot smell. It just gets so bad in the summer. So if you have the ability to not wear the neoprene boots, just have a pair of water shoes or something that have a little more ventilation in them, maybe. That's often the more comfortable way to go in the summer. The same with the neoprene gloves, right? The the neoprene is for the warmth, but the obvious other big thing we look for with gloves is to help us with to try to help us with grip. I've found that typically my hand, like just the skin on my hand, is like the best grip you're gonna get. So most of the time, the gloves that I put on aren't going to help so much with that. If you wear gloves to prevent against blisters or whatever, that's also fine. So you might not necessarily need to go and look for the fancy $30 or $35 sailing gloves that you can get at West Marine or APS. You can look. I think, who was it? Curtis, which maybe none of us know now. He was a few years ago, one of our past sailors. No, Olivia sailed with Curtis, but he would get the Atlas gardening gloves, and they're like $3 a pair, and they're not high tech made for sailing, but they actually have like a really nice grippy palm on them, and you wear through them in a season maybe, but then you just buy another $3 pair of gardening gloves, so they can actually be really nice for sailing when you're not worried about the cold. You're more trying to go for grip and just protect yourself against blisters. So that can be a handy way. Another, like the rain suit, kind of another thing it's maybe kind of a little step down from the real high tech sailing stuff, but probably several steps down in terms of price. So that's one thing you can look at. So what have we looked through so far? Gloves and boots, spray pants, spray gear, the dry suit, wetsuit. So as far as cold, one of the big things when you've got people in their first spring season, especially if it's their first season of sailing, when maybe you're still trying to figure out is sailing something that I'm interested in, because I don't know a lot about it yet. And so if you get out there and it's just really cold all the time, it's like, is this really as fun as everybody says it is? I'm just miserable. And then, even if it's you did the fall season, and so you like sailing, but now you're out and you are cold all the time. It's like, is it still worth it? So hopefully you're able to get to the point where it's like, yeah, I'm still willing to come out on the boat because it's still fun to sail, even if I get a bit cold. But it's just about figuring out what's an acceptable amount of cold, if we want to put it that way. So I forgot what I was going to say. But like, what is too cold and what is just kind of annoyingly cold, right? So especially when you're in the boat and it's windy, so we've got some water in the bottom of the boat and our feet are sitting in 45-degree water, and we get all those tingles, and we get those our feet starts going numb, and so I guess the one thing that is kind of worth realizing is that the numbness is not necessarily anything bad. It's really annoying. But it's not anything like dangerous. So when you're sitting there and you're like, man, I can't feel my feet, or like my cheeks are going numb, or that sort of thing. That's usually just it's really annoying, but I'll be okay. Something that is not necessarily okay is if you're realizing that you're just uncontrollably shivering, right? You're just sitting there shaking and you can't stop shivering, and it's almost like affecting your ability to, move around and move your tiller and stuff because you're shaking so much. That's the sort of thing when we're like, yeah, okay, we need to go get warm. So I think usually we don't see that happen, that much cold, but it is something. It's kind of just something to keep in mind. If I'm feeling really cold right now, but is it the kind of cold that like I should be worried about, or is it just kind of something to deal with? So most of the time we're okay. The times when we go in the water and we're struggling in the water to get our boat back upright for 5 minutes, and then we realize that the water is 45 degrees. That's often when we see, let's bring those couple people off the water because they're getting a little bit too much cold going on there. But most of the time it's just stuff that's like, it's really annoying and I'll have to deal with it. So it's all just about figuring out what your boundary is, and it kind of takes time. Definitely when you're first starting out, it is going to be better to err on the side of caution. And if you're sitting there wondering, am I getting too cold or am I still okay? But you're not sure, it's probably better to err on the side of caution and go in and get yourself dried off and warmed up. So you can kind of figure out that boundary as you go. So that's kind of the thing to think about as far as the cold. And then sometimes we're sailing in the rain, so that's going to kind of compound anything that's going on. So if it is a cold day, the rain is going to make it feel colder. If it's a really hot day, sometimes the rain just makes everything really humid and worse. But usually the big issue we have is when it is cold. It's like the wind chill. More wind is going to make things feel colder. So I know at least a couple of you I can like think of specific instances when we've it's been on the edge of our wetsuit dry suit policy, and everybody's standing in the middle of our clearing with the boats on the land. They're like, Josh, it's really not that cold right now, like we'll be okay. And then we go out and it's breezy and we're out on the water, so the temperature is colder anyway because we don't have the sun reflecting off the clearing. And then the wind chill makes it feel even colder than that. And they're like, wow, yep, I'm really glad you made us put those wetsuits on. So that is one thing to keep in mind when you're sitting in the middle of the clearing and we're trying to figure out, do we need to wear those wetsuits or dry suits? It's always going to be colder on the water. So it's kind of like if I know we got some Boy Scouts in here, be prepared, right? It's going to be much better if we go out with a little bit too much stuff, and then maybe we pull off the spray top halfway through and tie it in the boat so we don't lose it. But it's better to have to do that than to go out and realize you're just going to be shivering the whole time because you didn't bring the gear that you needed. So we'll borrow from the Boy Scouts and just say be prepared, because once we're out on the water, it's we either have to deal with it or we have to waste 20 minutes to sail in and put more gear on and come back out. I had something else I was going to say about that. I don't remember what it was though. Because we were talking about rain. That's right. So a lot of the times it's something we don't think of so much because it's literally something else is in the name. But when it's raining, sometimes sunglasses are really helpful, just because they keep the rain out of your eyes, especially if it's a hard rain or if it's really windy and so it's blowing sideways into your face. The sunglasses and like a hat will help with that. So like most of the time, we think of that as something that we are wanting for sun. And when it's rainy, it's usually not sunny. So that's the sort of thing we might leave behind. But sometimes in that rain, it's really nice to have those sunglasses and a hat. Or a visor. I recently found that a visor is actually really nice as opposed to a normal baseball cap, because you can kind of pull it as low as you want, especially if you have, like I had last fall, a lot of hair. It keeps I could pull the visor down as low on my head as I wanted because there's no top of the hat. Like the ball cap, you can only pull down as far as it goes. And I would often have trouble with that sliding off if I had to quickly move my head. So either one of those is good. Anything with a brim to block either the rain or the sun. We'll talk more about
the rain. You can wear a pair of ski goggles.
What's that, Peter?
You can wear a pair of ski goggles.
That's also true. I think often the problem that I see with like the ski goggles is you might get them fogging up. So that's just something to worry about. But if you don't have the fogging up issue, I think somebody told me you can like rub toothpaste on the inside of it and then wipe it off, and something about whatever chemical is in toothpaste keeps it from fogging up. So I'm sure there's like tricks like that that you can use. But yeah, so that could be another option too. If it's that probably helps with the cold as well, I would imagine, because that's more of a completely enclosed thing. It might keep your eyes from from freezing up, or whatever term you want to use. Because I've definitely felt that before when it's cold enough that it's like my eyeballs are cold. We'll continue from there. Yeah, so I guess a couple more things we could just real quick things we could cover. One that I forgot to mention when we were talking about wetsuits is if you've looked at like when you're trying to get a wetsuit and you're like, what are all these numbers that I'm seeing? What if you're looking at a wetsuit and it says like 3/2 millimeter, it's like, what does that mean, and what's the relevance to me? So typically the numbers that they're talking about is you'll see a different thickness of neoprene for the torso versus the arms and legs. So the common one that we recommend to sailors, and I think it's like the common one for scuba diving as well, is the 3/2 millimeters. So that means the torso is 3 millimeters and the arms and legs are 2 millimeters thick of neoprene. So it gives you a little more thickness, a little more insulation for your body, but then a little bit thinner so that it's easier to move around in for your arms and legs. So that's what those numbers mean if you've ever seen them. I think the thickest I ever saw somebody sail with was like a 6 millimeter, like all over. I think he said it was his dad's, when his dad used to do a lot of scuba diving, and it was like it was difficult to sit down in almost. You just felt like the compression on your legs. But so that's what those numbers mean. The other thing is when you're looking at wetsuits, you see like the full body ones, and then you see the shorty wetsuits that go down to like it's like shorts and a t-shirt sort of length for the arms and legs, and then some of them are like 2 pieces. So I think as far as like our wetsuit policy goes, you definitely need something that's on your legs and on your arms. So you can't grab the kind that's like just a big pair of overalls unless it also has a top. But if you have the top and the bottom, then that could almost be like a spray gear sort of thing, right? Where it's maybe when it is starting to get warmer, you can go out in just the overall piece. So that works just fine if you happen to have that kind. With the shorties, I think typically unless that's going to be like a second wetsuit that you're getting just so you do have a little more versatility, you're not really want to go for that as your main wetsuit, because when it is March and the water is 45 degrees, your arms and legs are just going to freeze if you don't have coverage all the way down to your wrists and ankles. So it's another thing that if you find yourself wondering about it or looking at getting one, then it can be a nice thing to add to the repertoire of different gear that you have. But don't make that be your main wetsuit, because it is not going to keep you warm when you really need to be warm. I think another thing about the cold water, which is like, I don't want to like walk back everything that I said earlier, but just kind of a like, this is at the heart of it. This is why we have to pay so much attention to the temperature guidelines that we have. If you think about what the worst case scenario in the cold water is, we pull somebody in with hypothermia, right? And that's obviously going to be a bit of a problem. Your body temperature has gotten too low for you to still really function as a normal human being before you get warmed back up. So a lot of people don't realize that you really get hypothermia at any time of the year if you're involving water. If we think about that, like when you go to the beach, what temperature is the water usually? Like if the water is 90 degrees, that's really hot. right? So probably when you go to the beach in the middle of the summer, that's somewhere around 80 degrees, maybe mid 80s, something like that. When it's it's in March and the water is 45 degrees, it's like, yeah, if you hang around in that for too long, then yeah, your body's going to get too cold. But even when the water is 80 degrees, if you sit around in 80-degree water for a couple hours, which that has been known to happen if somebody goes out and has, not with our high school program, but just boating in general. Somebody goes out and something bad happens to their boat and they end up in the water floating around for a couple of hours. You can get pulled out with hypothermia in the middle of July, because if we think about it, if the water is 80 degrees, our body temperature is what, 96, 98.6, something like that. So when you're in the water, the temperatures are trying to equalize. That's just kind of how science stuff works. The temperatures want to get the same. And your body is not going to warm up the water to any appreciable degree. There's just so much water around you. But in trying to do that, your body heat's going to go out of you into the water if those temperatures are trying to equalize. So the water is going to go from like 80 out to like 10 decimal places. Then maybe you can make a difference. It's going to stay at 80 degrees. Your body temperature is going to be continuously dropping towards 80 degrees as you sit there floating in that water. And eventually, I think the number I saw once, I didn't look this up just now, but a while ago, I think I saw once you get to like 86 degrees, that's basically anybody in the world is going to have be unconscious at that point. And much below that is when, you might even die. So it's not something that we have to go out every day worried about, because we do have all the safety boats for you and everything. And we're just not out there for that amount of time that you wouldn't expect to be floating in the water for a long period of time. But that is the underlying reason why we do have to be careful with those temperatures. So it's also why, obviously, when the water is 45 degrees, that's going to happen a lot quicker. So even if you've got your wetsuit on, if you're floating in the water in March, if we left you alone for half an hour, you would not be very happy. So that's why it's in March. That is something we do have to think about a lot more, and that it might be that if you go in the water once and you're splashing around for 5 minutes trying to right your boat, that is very likely that we might have to pull you back in, make sure you get warmed up so that we aren't worried about you going hypothermic.